We're so excited to be starting up our webinar series here again. This 2 years ago this week is kind of when we originally started doing the Chop Local webinar series. And so it's just been really fun over the last few years to have so many experts speak to us. And we've really been able to connect with a lot of people through these events. And so we're thrilled to be starting them again this spring. And you can see on my screen, we've got several webinars planned. We're really excited, especially for March, when we'll be having our new marketing specialist present on some social media strategies. And so it's just super exciting that we've been able to expand our team, and we hope that these webinars will continue to provide value to our audience. So if you're new here, you have never heard of Chop Local, we always like to do a little bit of an intro about who we are and what we do. Chop Local is an online marketplace specifically for selling meat. And so if you've ever heard of Etsy, if you're familiar with that, we kind of like to call ourselves the Etsy of meat. And so we have vendors across the country who sell their meat on our platform. And that kind of brings me to our next point, which is Chop Local University. And this is all of our farmer-facing programs. We offer a lot of free and low-cost materials to farmers and butcher shops to help them with their meat marketing. And that includes this webinar series. We've got a few courses. We talk a lot about email marketing, just all the different things related to e-commerce and meat marketing. So check out choplocaluniversity.com to find some of those resources. And if you're interested in selling on Chop Local, we're always looking to expand as well. And then the next thing we're really excited to announce tonight is that this spring we are also launching a podcast, and it's called Meat Success. So this first season, we have talked to 6 different farmers kind of across the country, and we're just thrilled to be able to share about their successes in meat marketing and hopefully pass that knowledge along to you guys as well. So feel free or be on the lookout for that on wherever you listen to podcasts. We are really excited to get that launched. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass things over to Stephen, and we can go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sydney, and thank you, Katie, for hosting me tonight. I always enjoy the webinars that we do together. It's always a lot of fun, and I have a lot of faith in the work that you guys do with farmers and ranchers. So it's exciting to be here today. I am going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see this. You getting this? Awesome. Okay. So I wanted to start out a little bit with a disclaimer. I didn't realize that the webinar was already started earlier, so some of you may have heard my comments previously, but I know that there's some concern right now around funding programs based on recent presidential activity. Overall, my general perspective is that I'm going to move forward as normal. In general, this is because nobody really knows what's going to happen. In general, we see a lot of reaction, and then we're not sure exactly what the long-term impact will be. Based on what I've been able to see, agriculture is not really the focus of the most recent activity. It's focused on around 7 other topics that are not directly related to most of the funding programs that farmers and ranchers would be applying for. And the biggest reason I would say continuing to move forward as normal is because, as we'll see later, any efforts aren't going to be wasted. The people who keep planning and preparing for grant programs are going to be established and ready to move when a new opportunity arises. So even if something were to happen, it's unlikely that grants are just gone forever. And so as soon as there is a new opportunity, these people would be poised to respond quickly instead of being caught flat-footed. So today, a basic outline for our presentation, we're going to talk about why funding is important. We're going to talk about the regional food business centers and specifically their Business Builder grant program. We'll talk about how this fits into a larger business development strategy, how you can start preparing for this grant today, and then how to leverage it in the future. And we'll end with a little bit of information about my company as well. So why is this funding important? I think that farmers and ranchers provide a valuable social service. I really like this quote from Wendell Berry. I
Then
usually
I'm gonna cut in here. I'm not sure if we're sharing if you're sharing the screen that you might be presenting off of. We're still looking at the first screen. Oh,
this
yep,
gotcha,
there we go.
even
Okay,
better. So you might
yep.
see me looking to the side instead.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So farmers provide a valuable social service. I like using this quote a lot from Wendell Berry, that good farmers who take seriously their duties as stewards of creation and of their land's inheritors contribute to the welfare of society in more ways than society usually acknowledges or even knows. And so I firmly believe that farmers and ranchers deserve better. They're the backbone of America, and they're an important part of creating sustainable local food economies. And although they do important work, many times, small farmers and ranchers value taking care of their land, their animals, and their communities more than they do about maximizing their profit. Unfortunately, our system is currently set up for people who maximize profit. So, if we want to develop resilient local food systems, we need to support the farms doing agriculture this way. Um, so grants can help make that transition. They can help increase things like profitability, customer base, product offerings. There's a pretty wide variety of grants and a lot of ways that they can have a life-changing impact on businesses. It's especially in areas related to increasing profitability and long-term viability of agricultural businesses, developing your farm, new products and local markets, improving the health of your land and animals, mentoring other young farmers, or helping and engaging with your community and customers more effectively. Right now, in particular, we're seeing a lot of funding that's focused on promoting value-added products, local food systems, connecting farms to institutions, improving nutrition, and promoting climate-smart agricultural practices. So there are lots of funding opportunities that are available. There's federal grant programs through NRCS, there's the VAPG, LFPP, things like over the last year, we've had the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant, there's the REAP. There are more than really can be covered succinctly. There are also state level grant programs through your Department of Ag, your Economic Development Office, state level certifications. There's things on the city or county level. And then there are also regional grant programs, which the regional food business centers is what we'll be covering today, but there's also ones for dairy. There's SARE, which is focused largely on education and extension, things like that. So there are so many grant programs. It's not really about finding a grant. If anything, you'll spend a lot of time looking at different grants. It's all about finding the right fit for your business. And that's where the business builder subawards come in. I think that these realistically are a good fit for a really wide range of businesses, particularly a lot of the people that would be on the call today. So the business builders, the first thing you need to know about them are that they're an extension of the regional food business centers. So there are 12 regional food business centers across the US, and each of them should have a budget allocated for the business builder subaward grants. They're focused on both farms and food businesses. So you don't actually have to be a producer, a rancher, or a farmer in order to apply. You can be a food business, somebody who's working in the ecosystem. And they're really focused on supporting a resilient, diverse, and competitive food system. So these food business centers are providing localized assistance to access local and regional supply chains, including linking producers to wholesalers and distributors. So they're really thinking on a regional level. And you'll see that based on this map, they've kind of broken it up. It's not quite this perfect, right? So like some they're not based on state. There are certain counties that will be excluded or included in different areas, but this is the basic idea of how it's broken up. And these centers are designed to address problems and take advantage of opportunities that are unique to the region, which is a thoughtful approach. And really, they're focused on three things, two of which are coordination. So they're trying to develop and implement strategic and funding plans for the region. And then they're also providing technical assistance. So they should provide direct technical assistance for small and mid-sized food and farm businesses and food value and supply chain coordination. So one of the exciting things is that you can actually reach out directly and get free assistance from the center technical assistance providers, oftentimes called CTAPs. You should be able to get this at no cost. I have a picture here, which is an example of the Appalachian region, and each of these points are where those CTAP providers are located. So a great first step, if you're considering applying for the Business Builder Grant Program, or even if you have no interest, is to reach out and request assistance from these CTAP providers, because they'll provide assistance based on your project and what your needs are. So they might,
Stephen,
yeah,
sorry. Can you explain what technical assistance means in this context? Because I think that that's a word that we use a lot in grants, but is not necessarily, might not, our attendees tonight might not know exactly what that means.
yeah. So it varies. In somewhere like the Great Lakes region, they're planning to have a full-time grant writer, right? So it's like somebody that will ideally help you write the plan and write the grant to the business builder, which would be an amazing resource. And then, I think their idea is to then also help you write grants for other outside opportunities. I'm imagining there's going to be a lot more demand than that person would have time to do. So we'll see what it actually ends up looking like. But examples of technical assistance would be things like, could be grant writing, could be business planning, could be network development. So if you are coming to them with an idea, they could help connect you with other people in the region. I think a lot of these CTAP providers are going to be organizations that are already interacting directly with producers or food supply chain stakeholders, right? So they already have some kind of expertise. It's already like a nonprofit that does farmer training. And so then they'll have some very specific technical assistance that they can provide you, or at the very least, they could help direct you to additional resources. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I first started working on our USDA grants for Chop Local, I didn't really know what technical assistance meant. And the way that I frame it in my head is that technical assistance is one-on-one assistance for the farmer or the business. And like you said, it could cover, business planning, marketing planning, grant writing itself, but it's that one-on-one assistance where somebody can help you. Not necessarily with technology, because that's what I literally thought when we first started. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's technical as in like very targeted, right? And then one-on-one is true. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought to say that. Thank you. Um, so because these organizations are based regionally, right? They have most of them have pretty long standing histories in their regions. They're using the business builders as an extension of this regional collaboration to invest in these regional supply chains, right? So each region has the ability to adapt the funding to their specific needs. So it's unfortunate that this is another disclaimer that there can be a lot of variation and nuance to the specific opportunities available through the business builder. So we've had like the Appalachian business builder looks a little bit different than the Heartland business builder, which looks a lot different than the Rocky Mountains in the Northwest. And so this presentation covers the trend of the opportunities. It may not be the case for your specific region. The best way is that you can be sure about the details of your specific opportunity are going to be to reach out to a CTAP provider in your specific region. They should be able to help you evaluate the opportunity. I'd also be happy to chat one-on-one with anybody about their particular region and the programs that they would have access to. But in general, we see that both for-profit and nonprofit entities are eligible. They may be required to be a small or mid-scale business, which depends on who you're asking. It can be varied based on your revenue, how many employees you have, et cetera. In Appalachia, their first round, they said that meant that it needed to be less than $1 million in gross income. But I've not seen that same statistic in other regions, so it can be highly variable. In general, I think the emphasis is placed on smaller scale businesses, but you could still be eligible even if you're larger in some cases. And then they are open to farmers or producers, ranchers, aggregators, processors, distributors, or even retailers. So it's throughout, it's post-harvest, right? So it has to take place after you've already produced something, but it's anything after the point of production all the way to the end consumer. So in general, they can provide up to $100,000. Some have only been 50,000, and they allow you to anywhere in the region can apply for this $50,000. Some have created state-specific programs, so they'll have some things that are available anywhere in the region, and then they'll have things that are only available in one state. The Northwest region has kind of started doing this, where they have ones that are just available in Idaho, for example. And many of them have not yet officially announced the opportunity. There's a little bit of a catch-22, unfortunately, because centers like the Heartland received a lot more applications in their first round. And so now they are going to only have one more round, and it'll probably take place within the next couple months. And so we're trying to be able to create awareness for some of those that have already started, while others still haven't quite really. So we'll be able to update people as more are announced, and you'll at least understand the baseline. And based on what we're talking about today, you should be able to get started on planning for what kind of project you'd want to do. All of them are similar enough in their general focus that you could get started even if yours hasn't been announced. And specifically, they're all focused on regional needs of the businesses and that are working towards expansion and other investment. And like I said, everything has to focus on post-harvest activities. So this wouldn't be a good fit if you're trying to expand your production, if you're a rancher and you want to put up fencing in order to raise more animals. But after the point of harvest, right, starting at the point of it's gone to the processor and it's ready to then be either stored, distributed, and sold, those are the kinds of activities that would then be eligible. So specific budget line items that are commonly available are things like staff time, business planning activities, software implementation, the purchase of specialized equipment, value chain and supply chain coordination, product development, marketing, supply chain analysis, and strategic development. I've bolded the purchase of specialized equipment in this list because this is actually pretty uncommon. Most grant programs that we see, they don't want to invest in construction and they don't want to invest in purchasing equipment, because then usually the government has to kind of track those items as they depreciate to a certain extent. And it's just a lot more paperwork, and they don't really want to mess with it in many cases. So this is a unique opportunity for some of that specialized equipment that wouldn't be available through many other programs. Specifically, they say that it cannot be used for purchasing or leasing land. This one can't be used for buildings or real estate, construction, or any kind of non-specialized equipment. So the difference here of specialized equipment and non-specialized is your pickup truck would not be considered specialized because it can be used for a pretty wide variety of things. But a specialized piece of equipment would be like a walk-in freezer or even a refrigerated vehicle, because that is very specific to food distribution. You wouldn't be using that for other purposes. So some of the most popular things that we've seen, and I'll just say it here because I'm imagining we have a lot of ranchers in the room, and these are the things that tend to perk up their ears, are expanding cold storage capacity through purchasing a walk-in cooler or a freezer, especially if you have a direct-to-consumer. If you're processing and selling your meat, expanding your capacity to store, creating flexibility in your processing schedule. That's something that we've seen a lot of people respond to. Increasing distribution capacity through investing in a refrigerated vehicle, so that helps you both be more efficient. You can reach customers who are further away. If you're doing home delivery, you'd be able to transport products from other producers if needed. Investing in processing equipment for things like value-added products in a commercial kitchen. So this could be a smoker, a dehydrator, oven, stoves, things like that. And in particular, we see it being competitive when people are designing them to be accessible by other producers. And then things like marketing support to create awareness and sales of original products. These grants should not be focused on everyday activities. So if you already have a marketing budget that you're using regularly, they don't want the grant to then be that marketing budget where it's just offsetting something you'd already be doing. But if you can design a project that's focused on, hey, we want to do this marketing campaign, this one-time push to enter into a new market, or to, promote this one new product that we have, or to attract a new demographic, right? That's the kind of thing that is more appealing for these grant opportunities. So there are a lot of different ways to use the funding, but in general, I think the biggest thing with the business builder is that you need to consider how it will impact more than just your organization. So there's a big difference between being eligible for a grant and being competitive for a grant. So some grants work on a formula to make awards. This would be like the NRCS EKIP grants or the REAP grants. You don't really write a narrative. It's mostly based on math. It's just about like what you're doing, and they have scores assigned to it. But grants like the Business Builder have evaluation criteria with the reviewers who score the application, and they say how well it aligns with specific goals. So you're kind of, the funder has something that they want to accomplish, and you're saying, I can accomplish that for you if you give me that money. So you really have to almost sell your idea and demonstrate how you're a good fit. And this is much more similar to like the nonprofit-y kind of grants where there's limited funding. You have to say how you're a good fit and why you should be entrusted with the money. Most competitive grants are going to provide a scoring rubric. So the business builders do have this. And unfortunately, it means that the same project could be competitive in one place and not very competitive in another. And it can be all based on that scoring rubric. There's usually not one section that makes or breaks your whole grant application, but it's important to take a step back and look at who they're trying to attract with the grant program and how you can accomplish their bigger picture goals. And this is where I emphasize again, even if it's not formally stated in scoring rubrics, we're seeing that in pretty much any grant program, if you can demonstrate that you're impacting other businesses and in an intentional and a tangible way, that's going to make you a lot more competitive. So there aren't a lot of grants that want to just impact your business. Usually they want to impact you as a catalyst to then impact a bunch of other businesses as well. So specifically with the Business Builder Subawards, they talk about that, and they want to see how you're going to be impacting other producers, other food businesses, and then consumers specifically. So some examples of how to know if you're impacting others is, are you working with other producers who are going to be able to increase their sales because you have this project? How will your project help others increase their sales? Will it create opportunities for others to expand their businesses? Will you be able to attract new customers? Will they now have access to food that they didn't previously have access to? So usually with a lot of people, we when we start working with them, we try to get them to make a list of all the businesses that they're already working with and thinking about what kinds of projects would benefit other businesses. So what moves you forward and also benefits and moves other businesses forward. Specifically for the Business Builder grants, they have a distressed community index. So people, if you or the people that you serve or like other producers that would benefit from the project are located in a distressed community. And we'll send out the slides for this grant. I know I'm moving a little bit fast maybe, but we'll send out the slides afterwards. And there's a link if you click on the distressed community index here. It takes you to the website. And they have distressed, at-risk, mid-tier, comfortable, and prosperous rankings. And you want to see, are you or other impacted businesses or your customers located in a distressed or an at-risk area? And those are what's going to be the most competitive for this program. County level rankings are important, but you can also look at your specific zip code. So I've worked with some people who, the county that they're in is considered prosperous, but then if you look at their zip code, it's distressed because it's like they have a lot of the bougie people moving in, on the mountaintop around where their farm is, and it's driven up the score. But they can still talk about how their actual zip code, their community, has a pretty substantial need. So this would be an example of, in Tennessee, all the red ones would be considered distressed, and then all the way to blue. And so many times this is centered around urban areas. Many times it's pretty rural areas tend to be more distressed. And then like urban, suburban, tend to be more comfortable and prosperous overall. So I would encourage you, as you're considering the business builder, open up that website, take a look at to see where you are, and see if you're working with other producers, other businesses, where are they, right? And just kind of evaluate and see, you know, how you could tie that in. For the timelines for the applications, I have an example here. This is not for all business builders. Like I said, there are 12 different regions. Some of them have not even been announced yet. Others of them only have one more round until the funding's been used up. So it's kind of hard to thread the needle well. Um, but if you reach out, I'm more than happy to talk about your specific region. This is from the Appalachian region. Um, Most of them are planning multiple cycles. So in Appalachia, they're planning 5 cycles. In the Heartland, they were planning 3, and now they're just doing 2. Everything needs to be done by December of 2027. So projects can be up to 2 years in length, but everything has to be completed by December of 2027. So even if you apply in early 2027, that then just makes your project be a little bit shorter. Based on the competitive nature of the grant thus far, I would also encourage most people, if you're considering this funding, to move on it pretty quickly. Most grants require a match, which means that you need to put some of your own money into the program in order to apply. This one does not require, or most of them that I've seen have not required a match, and so, or require a very small one. So that brings a lot of more people and out of the woodwork who want to apply. And I would also just estimate in general, after you apply until you hear back and get the money, at least 6 months. Unfortunately, that's kind of how all grants are. 6 to 9 months is pretty average. And so if you're really in need of something right now, it might not actually be a great fit for the grant program. You usually need to be thinking a little bit in advance, because if you apply for something and then buy it while you're waiting to hear back, you kind of disqualify yourself. They won't pay you for anything that you purchase while you're waiting to hear about the grant. So usually you need to be thinking at least 6 to 9 months in advance in order to really use the grant well. So usually you have like a 30 to 90-day window on average between the announcement and when it will actually be due. It's the spring. A lot of people are going into their busiest time of year, and this is most of the ones that have not been announced yet are saying that they will be announced in the spring of 2025. So starting the first step, I would really encourage most people to begin working and thinking about it, so that then you'll already have some momentum before you get too busy. And we'll talk about the first step, which is the budget, which usually takes the longest. Whenever we work on a grant, we always work on the budget and the work plan first. We start by reviewing the priority areas for the grant, which we just kind of went over, the idea of these regional food systems. How can you impact these distressed counties? How can you impact other producers? How are you helping the middle of the supply chain with processing, aggregation, distribution? So keeping those things in mind, what I encourage people to do is just create a big list of budget line items for your business over the next 3 years. What does expansion look like over the next 3 years? And an example of this is a business plan. So if you have a business plan, you've already got most of the hard work done. After you have that big list of budget line items or a business plan, you can review eligibility of specific line items with a CTAP provider. I'm happy to chat as well about what would be eligible, what would be competitive. We also find that a lot of times people have a foggy idea of how much something will cost, but it's often very wrong. And so I would encourage you to start getting quotes now. If you're interested in building out or like in purchasing a walk-in freezer, go and find out the actual model that you want to buy, get a quote for how much it will cost, the delivery fee, the installation. Understanding those costs will set you up well, and usually that can be a couple of weeks while you wait for people to respond and get back to you. So if you only hear about a grant 3 weeks before it's due and you don't have that kind of thing already ironed out, then usually you're caught flat-footed and there might not be enough time for you to develop a strong application. I already talked about the specific things that are in the budget, but examples of them are um, being as specific as you can, right? So when I look at specialized equipment, I think about what's the purchase price? How much is it going to cost to ship it? How much is it going to cost to install it? Can I buy like a repair kit or anything like that? Do I need any special tools or certifications? Do I have the power requirements to operate the specialized machinery, right? Are there like permits that go along with that kind of thing? For labor, you usually would need to articulate, all right, maybe we want to expand into 3 new farmers markets this summer. That means we need this many people to work this many hours. They spend this many hours on packing, this many hours on driving, this many hours of selling, this many hours getting back. It happens this many times per month over this many months. The markets are this many miles away. So all those details are really how you develop your budget. And it's hard for anybody except for you to know what those are going to be. But when I work with people, this is the kind of thing that I just kind of give them homework and say, go and actually articulate these numbers so that we can then have an informed budget. Um, and another example is with technical assistance. You usually would need a quote, right? So if you're wanting to do something like marketing, going and talking to Chop Local, as a plug, and getting a quote to understand what are the deliverables that they're going to give you, right? Is it XYZ? They should be able to articulate what they want to do for you, how much it's going to cost, and over what kind of a time frame. And so working with contractors can oftentimes be a drawn out process because they're already busy. And so it might take a couple weeks to get that work plan nailed down well. So starting it now rather than waiting until the grant is announced is usually a good idea. After you have an idea of your budget, you'll want to be thinking about how to quantify your impact. So many times, like I said, they'll have a rubric. They might actually even define metrics or deliverables, and they might say the number of producers who benefit from your project. So that's an invitation for you to quantify your impact. And this usually means looking at what your current capacity is now. And usually I think about this in terms of what are your bottlenecks, right? What are your speed bumps or roadblocks? Like what's the most you could do at your full capacity right now? And then what would your capacity be at maximum after the project, right? So it doesn't have to be the day after you get the grant. You're trying to think about, if I invest in a new walk-in freezer, and what will my capacity be the day that that new walk-in freezer is no longer enough, if that makes sense, right? So it's assuming you could eventually reach that new maximum capacity. What does that picture look like? Rather than what can you do the day after? I think it's understandable that you would have to scale up slowly. So this often involves, what is your vision for growth? What's your long-term expansion plan for the business? And so having that articulated is usually very helpful. And it's all about the story between your current capacity and the end result, right? In particular, focusing on other producers and consumers, and how can you assign number to the change. So you can talk about, I'm currently bottlenecked by my cold storage capacity. I can only process 2 head at a time. The processor is 7 hours away, which means that I can't do it more than once a week. That means that I don't have enough high quality meat cuts on hand to keep and attract high value customers. I just get flooded with lower value cuts. And then I can't expand into larger markets that need a larger volume at one time. And so if I had this new walk-in cooler, I'd be able to process 5 to 6 head at a time. I would be able to get this new larger institutional customer and be able to then, significantly scale up my operation. So that's kind of like, what is the story of what your current bottleneck is and how the grant would impact that. And this is usually a pretty good temp check, because if you're making your budget and it does, and kind of like the impact of what your budget is, it doesn't align with the funder goals, you need to change the focus. You shouldn't put forward a grant application if you can't kind of quantify your impact in the terms that the funder cares about. And so maybe that means you don't apply for the grant, or maybe it means you focus on different budget items, if that makes sense. So example would be, total cold storage capacity, maybe right now you only have 60 square feet, but you'd have 200 square feet afterwards, right? That's very easy math. You look at what the footprint of the new cooler would be. You could talk about the number of other producers who sell products at your farm store. Maybe right now you don't have the capacity to sell from any other producers, but with this project, you'd be able to now increase, the total volume that you're selling, and you could support 3 more producers. Maybe your revenue will grow, or you'd be able to create new value-added products. You could, even if you source products from other producers, what volume are you able to source, or what premium price are you able to pay to other producers? Maybe a distribution vehicle helps you expand and reach different customers who are further away, or maybe it'll help you introduce or kind of reach a new efficiency of scale, which makes it viable to sell your product into new markets, particularly maybe underserved communities. So this really all drives home the importance of business planning. Grants are not a short-term solution. Free money is not free. You're going to spend a lot of time working on a grant, and so you'll be using that's your most valuable asset, and you'll also usually be required to give a large match of time, money, and reporting. So there is an opportunity cost for applying for these grants. I find that, like I was saying earlier, grant writing is very similar to business planning. The content that you'll need in a grant application is the exact same as what's in a business plan or feasibility study. I really like to think of a grant as a business plan with a time limit. So it really should take a larger strategy and make it the next logical step. Many COVID-19 grants did not follow this format, but in general, the majority do. So like I said, around 30 to 90 days to prepare a grant, unless you have a lot of time on your hands, unless you have some of this business planning already figured out, you're not going to be prepared when a grant application is announced. So going through the effort now to do business planning, understanding your long-term strategy is going to help you quickly identify and respond to new opportunities. So in order to do that, you want to make sure you understand where you are, write down kind of what you're already doing, make sure that you're tracking your time, understanding your hidden costs. This is really how you're going to understand what the most sustainable business model for your farm is anyways. After you understand where you are, you get to brainstorm. And this list of the brainstorming is the exact same thing that you would use for the business builder grant. So if you've already gone through this process and have a big list of what you want to accomplish over the next 5 to 10 years, you don't have to keep redoing it every time there's a new grant. So you do it once, you can keep it updated, and then as each new grant opportunity comes, you're prepared. I really like this quote from Eisenhower about plans are nothing, but planning is everything. So it's really the planning process that adds all the value. Even if you have a plan, it's going to change. And many times we work on people with grants, and no matter how much work we put into making the best plan that we can for a grant, it usually ends up changing during implementation. And so it's more about understanding why you're doing something, what the driving factors are, so that even when you get the grant, you're able to adapt quickly and still kind of follow the same idea. So once you start getting grants, it does get easier to get more over time. The first one is always the hardest, but things can be reused. You also have a stronger local network and supportive people who can help you. There are lots of other grants that are available through the federal level, the state and regional. We find that it can be difficult for a lot of people, but in summary, there are a large number of grants available. It's important to find an opportunity that's a good fit for your business. And the best way to know what a good fit is by taking the time to do business planning before a grant becomes available. And so that's what I would really encourage most of you. Many of the people on this call, your business builder isn't available yet, but going through these steps will prepare you for them. The regional food business centers are good coordinators to help you reflect on your business planning efforts. So like Katie was saying, that technical assistance might look like, if you're starting to do some business planning, they might be able to review it for you. They might be able to give you feedback. They might see what you're trying to do and be able to connect you with other people who can either help you with that or who would be good partners as you're pursuing a certain path. And then potentially they can help you access the business builder grants, which would be a great opportunity to fund the next step. So how to get started? We personally would love to be your stewards. Stewards Unlimited helps small farmers change their business forever by identifying new funding opportunities, designing competitive projects, and then winning funding through proposal development. In general, we like becoming a one-stop shop to connect people with resources. So a lot of times what we're doing is connecting people with people who can help them plan a little bit better. And so we've seen the organizations which already have a business plan in place be far, far more competitive for grant funding. It shows that they have a market-driven need for their services. They're able to demonstrate previous success, and they're able to show how it aligns with their future plans. And they also understand much more quickly if a grant is a good fit because they understand where they're trying to go. So both our and their jobs become 10 times more easier when somebody has gone through a business planning effort. That also then positions them really well for what we call our grant alerts. So a shameless plug, we have a free service called our grant alerts, where if you sign up through here, we have a grant tag verification survey where you say where you are, what tags would be of interest to you. And then whenever we come across them, we send them out. We usually send 5 to 10 out a week nationally. And so those are the opportunities that you generally need to be able to respond to a lot faster. So the people who already have done all this and kind of planned ahead are also the people who are able to take advantage of these grant alerts because they may not have as much time to respond, but they already know where they're going. So in the broad picture overview for next steps and how to apply what we've been talking about today is first getting started seeking new information. You've already done that by showing up today. I think everybody is extremely busy, and so taking the time out to learn something new and seek advice is a great first step. I would encourage each of you to follow the link in the slides, go to your regional food business center, and then reach out to the closest CTAP provider and just see what kind of services they are offering and start that conversation because everyone's going to be busy. And so the sooner you can start that ball rolling, the better. Ask them or other trusted partners about business planning resources. The stronger you can make your business case for why the grant would impact yours and others' businesses, the better off you'll be. And so starting to float out what your idea is and finding other support from other producers it's a pretty long process. And so starting that is helpful. Brainstorm budget items for your next step. I generally say come up with 10 things, even if you only are going to use 3. So coming up with a big list and then trimming it down is a lot easier than starting out with only a few things and trying to expand it later. Reach out and see if it's what you're already planning to do is a good fit for the Business Builder grant. I'm happy to chat one-on-one with anybody, and I'm sure we're going to have time for questions to talk about anybody's ideas, and I can give specific feedback. Or if you reach out to your CTAP providers, they should be able to give you feedback as well. And then I would encourage everybody to sign up for our free grant alerts to stay informed. If you've gone through this effort to do this planning or to apply for the Business Builder, there might be another grant that would be a good fit for the project as well. So sign up for the grant alert so that you'll stay informed and know as new opportunities arise. So that is the end of the monotonous presentation. I'm excited to chat and answer any questions.
Okay, so kind of like Steven said, feel free to add your questions to the Q&A form. As you do that, we're going to start going through some of the questions that came through during the presentation. So this kind of takes us back a little bit to the beginning of the presentation, but did the presentation include how to find their CTAP, like in their region, or will
Yeah.
those? Okay.
So, are you still able to see my screen?
Yes. Yep.
So if you type in Regional Food Business Center into Google, you'll find it pretty quickly. Or this slide, it has a hyperlink on it, so you can click on this. This is also will take you to the website where it'll show you where you are. and it has this map, and it should show where generally you're located, and it will have links to all of the specific centers. So each of these colored coordinated sections will have a specific name and a link to that website.
Okay, perfect. And this is kind of a good time to ask this question as well. We have an attendee from Alaska. And so is she available or eligible for these grants? And the CTAP providers, can she have access to them as well?
Yes. So the way I think it works is Alaska, Hawaii, Guam, American Samoa, Commonwealth, and Puerto Rico. There is a region of their own, and it's like I forget the name, but it's the islands region, and they should have CTAP providers as well.
Okay. So maybe you know this off the top of your head. Has the Northeast region released any previous rounds for this funding?
Not yet. They've undergone an application process for people who wanted to provide technical assistance, but they haven't actually announced the business builder program yet. But they say it should be available early 2025.
Okay. I saw another question here kind of farther down the list, but if the says not open, is there any type of time frame? And I think that would kind of relate to what you just said, early 2025, probably not a solid date just yet though.
Unfortunately, but there you should be able to click on the name of this. Most of them should have websites, and the website would have better information than the general like the overview page will just say not open or open. And then if you go to their specific website, most of them say, spring 2025, or they might actually give a month. And you should be able to sign up for a newsletter from that specific region as well. So I'd encourage everybody to do that from your regional food business center. If you're signed up for grant alerts, we will also send you an alert when it's announced, but obviously it's better to get it directly from them.
For sure. Going on to an equipment question, purchasing equipment, does it have to be new or can it be secondhand?
I have not seen that it has to be new. It might vary based on your region, but I've not seen it always have to be new. As long as you can justify what your purchase is, right? You also generally can't purchase it from anybody that you might have a conflict of interest with. So I think that's sometimes the concern with used equipment, that you can't purchase it from like a family member or something like that.
Okay, and that is a good segue into the next question, which relates to labor and family members. If you're applying for labor costs or labor funding, are there restrictions on hiring blood relatives similar to what there might be in other grant funding opportunities?
I have not seen that specifically articulated. In general, I would say it's not worth it. And yeah, I would say generally no. For labor, usually I would say it's worth doing it as some kind of pilot project, but you'll have trouble trying to hire anybody that you're related to.
Okay. Sorry, this one's a little bit longer, so I'm trying to decide the best way to read this off. Um, Okay, I'm going to jump to the next one and come back to that. Can you share a little bit about what needs are unique to the Heartland region or the uniqueness of maybe any of the regions if you know them?
The unique needs.
Yeah, and maybe that's something you're not familiar with for each region, but if there's maybe specific things.
Well, so an example might be that, let's see, the Northwest region is a pretty good example of them adapting it. So a couple of the regions are pretty similar, but then the Northwest has, I think, 5 or 6 different programs in the business builder. So they have one that's like specific to Wyoming. They have one that's all in their region, but it's only available for food entrepreneurs. Then they have one that's only available in Idaho. Then they have one that's only available for meat supply chains. And then they have one that's only available for diverse markets, right? So, whereas some of the other regions have those same priorities, but it's all included in one business builder application, they've decided to break it up and say, this is how much we want to allocate just specifically for meat, right? And so we're making sure that this total dollar amount goes towards meat. And so that might be a good thing for some of the people, but it also might be harder for others. It kind of depends.
So going back to the question I was referencing earlier, you kind of touched on, most of these grants should be focused on post-harvest activities, which I think might hinder what this question is asking, but I do want to bring it up anyway, just to kind of reiterate this point. Would a good option for the grant be expanding farm capacity? For raising beef, because the existing freezer space will bottleneck the number of beef that can be processed. So I think we kind of went over, this has to be post-harvest, but I did want to bring that question back up.
I think this is a great example of a project being what it sounds like they're saying is they want to invest in cold storage. So that actually is an eligible project, but if they presented it as they want to increase their production, it might not be as competitive as if they told the story from a market perspective. And so in a case like that, I wouldn't necessarily talk about they'd be able to produce more, but maybe I would talk about how they could increase their revenue, because the more beef they can sell direct to consumer rather than in a wholesale market brings more revenue into their business. Maybe talk about how that will increase efficiency and reduce, by making fewer trips. Maybe that would then allow them to access new customers, maybe institutional customers, because they could have larger order sizes. Like the increased production is not a bad thing, but it's just not what the funder cares about. So it just depends on which of the impacts of your project are you going to highlight and really spend your time talking about. And in this case, there probably are other things like that they would want to highlight if they stepped back and thought about it and reviewed the funder's priorities.
Yeah, and hopefully, I know that was an anonymous question. Hopefully I communicated that all right, but if not, I mean, certainly reach out to Stephen and he can give you a more specific answer or advice. Let's keep moving through these. When it comes to processing red meat or poultry, would you not be able to use it to build a facility or add on, but you could use it for equipment?
Yeah. So again, the regions have autonomy, and if you're in the Northwest region, they have a specific program just for the meat side, whereas other regions they kind of have it lumped in. But that is a good distinction, that you couldn't expand your footprint, you couldn't use it for construction, but you could purchase specialized equipment that would go into your processing facility.
Are
Or
there
use it for planning, right? So if you even if you wanted to do construction, you could pay a professional to help you come up with schematics for what that construction would look like. So that's not considered actual construction, that's still business planning. So if you're not even ready to buy the new equipment, you could hire somebody to do a feasibility study or a business plan, engineering drawings, architecture drawings for what an expansion would look like.
Okay, one of our questions, the participant says that his freezer space is pretty much exactly what you explained in your slide, but he would like to expand that capacity to a walk-in freezer. And this would include helping other ranchers sell their beef, pork, and lamb. So they describe this as maybe a boring grant. How often are these boring grants, such as a walk-in freezer, ranking? And maybe that's more of your opinion, but how well do you think those perform?
How competitive they'll be.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
actually think that's what they want, right? Like they're looking at middle of the supply chain. If you can become a focal point, and this is like we've worked on a number of projects like this, like your boring one. That's I think a really good fit, in fact, because they're they're not trying to start whole new businesses. They're trying to find people who are already successful, already have connections, have staying power, who aren't going to like go out of business in a year, right? People who already have a track record, are doing well, are ready to expand, and are interested in helping other people too. And so you could become a hub, where you could then store for other people as well, help them access new markets. I definitely think you should take a closer look.
Um, okay, this kind of goes back to the regions. And so this question is it better to focus on regional projects, or can you project cross-regional boundaries? Okay, so I don't know if I explained that one well enough, and we might need the person that asked this question to explain a little bit more.
I think I understand.
Okay,
Um,
good.
I would say cross-regional is fine. In fact, those CTAP providers, technically, if you're on the border somewhere and there's a CTAP provider from a different region, you're actually supposed to go to them. You don't have to stay within your same region. You're supposed to go to whoever is closest. So I would say what they're looking at is the number, and they just have these regional boundaries based on like what they assume to be similar challenges and opportunities. But if you can impact other people that are across the regional lines, that's equally as competitive.
Um, in regards to equipment, what are the chances an application being approved for an upgraded farmer's market booth and freezer? What are the chances of those being approved? Or do you like that idea?
I think it could be. I would push back on you and say, is anybody else benefiting from it? Um, so you can have a project like that, but I would look at the distressed index, right? Like, are you in an area that would receive priority, or are you going to be helping other producers access new customers at the farmers market, or are you going to a place where they don't have a lot of food access and you're selling there? Um, and kind of mull over some of those ideas. I really push people to think about you need to demonstrate impact to at least one or two other producers. Some of the business builders say that have that as a requirement that you have to impact more producers than just yourself. Not all of them have articulated it, but in order to be competitive, you want to.
Okay, I do want to hit before we kind of run out of time or a lot of people hop off. I do want to hit a couple kind of just housekeeping things. The recording for this webinar tonight will be available either tomorrow or Thursday. That'll be on the Chop Local YouTube, and we'll send that out to our email list as well. And like Stephen mentioned earlier, we will include the slides in that email as well. I know somebody asked about clicking links. You'll be able to do that once you get access to the slides. And kind of just one more housekeeping thing. I do see a few things in here about the federal freeze on grants. We did briefly touch on that at the beginning, but in case people hopped on a little bit later, I want to bring it up one more time and just mention, Stephen, I'll let you maybe expand a little more, but it does seem like these types of grants will not be included in that freeze, but I'll let you expand more.
Right. So I think there's no real way to know, unfortunately. But my general strategy is moving forward as normal. We don't know what's going to happen. It does not seem like these agricultural programs are the focus. Like there's like a sheet that was released that has 7 topic areas that they're really kind of focusing on, and they're not agriculture. except for in the small way that agriculture overlaps with like climate. Some of the climate smart type programs would be more likely to be impacted, but a program like this is not a huge priority for what they seem to be doing. And like I mentioned, the efforts you would go through to start on this are also just business planning efforts. So if you go through this and something does happen, you haven't wasted your time. You could then take your plan to a loan, right? If you want to, if it was a good enough, if it was that important for your business, you're one step closer to getting that funding either from a grant or from another source.
Okay, another interesting one. We want to start processing turkeys, which would require larger equipment. But once we are up and running, we want to get classes for other farmers. Would this grant be a good fit?
Um, So the equipment would be, yeah. Um, and then I guess it depends a little bit on the classes. If it's related to production, probably not. If it's related to processing, it could be. I don't know how much of the educational, like I wouldn't fund the classes themselves through the grant because that's not a big focus from my perspective. It might depend on where you are and what your regional priorities are, but the equipment itself would be, and you could tell that bigger story about how then this will serve as a community resource, right? Maybe if they'd be able to process at your facility, or you'd be able to, show other people and guide them through that.
Are there guidelines towards refrigerated vans?
Hmm, not that I know of. It's yeah, I'm not sure exactly what.
No, that's okay. Um, I do see a question in here about fees, and typically I would say if you are interested in working with Stephen, and correct me if I'm wrong though, definitely reach out to him to discuss more about fees specific to your business and how he can help you.
Yeah, and also we provide anybody who's on this webinar, we'd be happy to have a conversation with you about this grant, and it's provided at no cost. I firmly believe that this is one of the types of grants that you probably could apply to without our support, and so I think people should go for it. And I also think that the more people apply for funding, even if it's not with our assistance, the more it demonstrates the need, the more we can argue about needing this kind of funding in the future, and the better it is for all of us. So I'm happy to kind of give you some general guidance on direction, and then even if we don't end up working together.
Yeah. Let's just touch on one more. Does this grant opportunity cover marketing your products? Um, can you have more than one maybe project? I think they're asking. So maybe you want to cover freezer space and marketing, or should you focus on one specific project?
So it's a good question. You can include both. I would try to figure out a way, and probably there is a way to combine both of those into one like thematic project, right? So if you're trying to increase your marketing, obviously you're trying to sell more. And if your freezer space already isn't enough, then you need more freezer space in order to keep up, to be prepared for the increased demand through the marketing, right? So if you looked out like a year or two in advance and said, with this marketing campaign, we would expect our sales to increase by 50%, but with our current freezer capacity, we wouldn't be able to meet that. So we need to increase our cold storage so that we can accommodate any growth in demand, right? So you can kind of tie them together into one project, even if they're different expenses.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that is a good kind of stopping point for tonight. Just to kind of cover a few more things that we already discussed. We will be sending out these slides in the recording either tomorrow or Thursday. And through your registration, you were asked to indicate if you're interested signing up for either the Chop Local University email list or Stewards Unlimited. And so if you are interested in those things, we'll get you added here in the next few days. But certainly always encourage you to reach out to Stephen with more specific questions about this grant or future grant funding opportunities. And if you're interested in more educational resources through Chop Local, you know where to find us at choplocaluniversity.com. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us, and thank you to all of our participants for hopping on tonight. So let us know if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Sydney.
Yeah, bye.